On today's episode of Still Processing, a 76ers podcast, we break down Game 5 for the 76ers and Tyrese Maxey's explosive 46-point performance. We'll also take a look at the upcoming Game 6 back at home in Philadelphia. All that and more on today's episode of Still Processing, a 76ers podcast. Well, they did it against, I think, all odds, especially down to the final 30 seconds. The Philadelphia 76ers have won Game 5 and forced a Game 6 back at home in Philadelphia. I don't know how many of us here predicted that, but that's what happened. I don't think anyone really, especially those in the building in New York on Tuesday night, were expecting that to happen. Again, down 6 with 28 seconds roughly on the clock. But Philadelphia found a way. Sam, you were in the building. How did just before we break down the entire game itself, what was the vibe in those final 30 seconds before overtime?
Well, for me, at least, up on the Chase Bridge, which is where the overflow media seats are, I was getting ready to publish a story about how the Sixers couldn't get it done, about how they're in the offseason, they weren't able to seal the deal in the series. And then Tyrese does what he did, and I was just beside myself when he hit that three. And then, obviously, he come down the other court. The Knicks obviously had a chance. He didn't cash in, but I was just beside myself. I could not believe that Tyrese had pulled that off. It was really, stunning. One of the really great things about the Garden atmosphere is obviously it gets really loud when the Knicks do stuff, and very loud when Joel Embiid does anything. There were a lot of fucking Embiid chants before the ball even tipped off in the game. Before, there were times where he wasn't even on the court and it was going. But as loud as it can be, it can also get very quiet at a moment's notice. And you just heard that quietness as Tyrese did his thing in those final 30 seconds or whatever. Really just an unbelievable game for Tyrese overall that has a signature moment to it that, regardless of the outcome of this series, we will look back on for many, many years to come. It was really just a fantastic game that I did not expect them to win. I don't think most people expected them to win on either side of this series. They pulled it off, and there's more basketball to be played now.
Yeah, I mean, fantastically, there's more basketball we played. Of course, Sam Giovanni, clutch points. I got so excited, I completely skipped over who's here. Obviously, it's myself, Zach Chavalella, Sam Giovanni, Justin Crosby, PSN. We got the whole group together to talk about this one because that was one hell of a game up in New York. I mean, Justin, why don't we go just emotion? You know, what was your feeling just after that game, after they won that in OT?
I mean, just unbelievable sense of what the hell just happened.
It's not that's not a game the Sixers win.
I literally was tweeting a whole thing about how Embiid, 9 turnovers, kind of folded, that whole thing, getting ready to just press in. And then when all that's happening, I'm like, yo, I can't believe this is happening. And then some of my friends called me and I'm like, yo, I cannot talk right now. I have to figure out what is going on. And just I'm gonna be honest, and we could talk about, later on in the series or the next game, but I'm just super happy for Tyrese Maxey. To see how far he's come, and he still has ways to go, right? But to see him have these moments and step up, it makes me feel, even regardless what happens in the series, if they make it out the series, the rest of the playoffs, it makes me feel confident in him being here for the back end of Joel's prime and him being the potential face of the franchise in a couple years. It just makes me, feel happy for, if you're a Sixers fan, there's nobody, you can't hate the kid. Even New York fans, it's hard to hate Tyrese Maxey. Like, he's just a baller. He's not scared. And that's the one thing I've seen. We've seen the whole, and we don't have to rehash history, but we've seen Ben Simmons and whether he was scared and Harden. He had some moments, but in the biggest moments, he folded. And you see, Maxey didn't have a great game 4 at all in the fourth quarter. And here he bailed out the team when they needed him the most, even after he had a bad turnover. And it's like, to me, it's just like, it couldn't happen to a better kid. And, I'm just happy for him. And I'm happy that the Sixers got a good one. And I'm happy that Nick Nurse took the chains. Well, that's bad. But just took the handcuffs off of him. And I know it's still bad, but, just let him roam free, because we saw how Doc tried to hold him back a lot of ways. Like, in the beginning, his rookie year, he didn't develop as we wanted him to. They tried to send him down to the G League. He stayed up there, and he just continually gets better and steps up to the plate. And, last night was a culmination of that work that you see. He showed flashes of it 50 multiple times this year, but I don't know. I can't believe that they have another game at a 9 p.m. on a Thursday, but I just can't believe it.
Yeah, 9 p.m. on a Thursday is the biggest thing. I'm sorry. 9 p.m. is just unbelievable. Yeah. I understand there's another game. It's also an East Coast game. It's okay if there's a little overlap. 9 p.m. is unbelievable.
We were talking about that at the practice facility earlier today. It's I don't think anyone's happy about that one. But who knows? Maybe it'll keep some people who are traveling away from the game. You never know. But as far as Tyrese Maxey is concerned, obviously, first and foremost, you're happy for the kid. Just as not even as whether you're a Sixers fan, whether you cover the Sixers like us, or whatever relation you have to the team, or if you don't have one, like he's not an unlikable guy in any way. He has the smile of Rick Fox and the killer instinct of Kobe Bryant. He's an incredible guy to watch. One of the most talented young men in the league, and someone who's going to be a focal point of the NBA for years to come if he keeps progressing like this. The one thing I do want to say, Justin, you brought up his his rookie year and all that. He actually recently spoke, I think this was last night, he spoke about one time where he was benched last year, and he was just so distraught over it, right? And what did he do? He didn't wallow in it, but he just worked 10 times harder. And now, I'm not saying that I'm not a guy who typically gives undeserved flowers to Doc Rivers, and I'm not saying that him doing what he did was with the intention of what it resulted. But what I will say is, without that happening, Tyrese Maxey probably is not the player that he is today, because it continued to build character in him. And while we're talking about unlikely heroes helping Maxey along this way, we got to give a shout out to Buddy Hield, who is still contributing to the Sixers, even if he's nowhere near that court. This is the second time now that he has picked up Tyrese Maxey vocally. And I just got to say, it's just you never hear about that side of players. It's very rare you hear about that side of players, especially, a guy like Buddy Hield, who, he never really, he's not at that point in his career where he's that haggard, NBA vet, but he's acting like it. He's acting like that Derek Fisher type. He's acting like, what really people would expect out of Kyle Lowry, even though he's not at that point yet in his career. But just good for him for realizing, listen, if I can't contribute on the court, I'm sure as hell going to impact this game any way that I can. And that's what he did with Tyrese Maxey. So that relationship is just shooting off to the moon. And honestly, it's I know a lot of people aren't talking about wanting to bring Buddy back after what has happened this season. I think an off season with the Sixers could help cure that a little bit. But I also do think that there is some value that you have to add to the equation with just who Buddy is and how he contributes to the team. You're not going to pay a guy, X million amount of dollars just to basically be a bench warming coach. But I think that he'll be able to contribute as a player more than that. So just a little bit of a stock boost in bringing Buddy back this offseason for me.
One of the things that Justin brought up that was also really good was the fourth quarter of Game 4, and that was something Maxey brought up in his availability yesterday as something that was motivating him, that he felt like he wasn't there for his team and he didn't want to, have the same thing happen where he shot poorly or was too timid on certain looks. Like he really just took control, 17 points in the fourth quarter, including obviously that miracle stretch in the final minute. Really, the entire theme of Maxey's media availability yesterday is that he's just incredibly locked in. Like he's always a great person to be around. He obviously has that big bright smile. He's always very like happy guy, and he put it just perfectly yesterday. In wasn't his only answer, but it was a part of it where he said, "I'm a happy guy, but I absolutely hate losing," which I think is just put perfectly, a great microcosm of who Tyrese is, just as a person and as a player, someone who is always very upbeat, but also extremely determined and can cut it off in a minute and just be super serious and locked in. Like someone asked him just how it felt to win the game yesterday, and he just said, "Mandatory. We got to keep playing." And everything was just super, super business about, and it wasn't. He's never standoffish. He wasn't like rude or anything, but he was just very honest, very transparent about like there's still much more of a job to do. And I think that really makes him someone easy to for the team, kind of fall in line behind, not in a way of like he's commanding everything by being bossy, but just because he can handle it. And Tobias said as much. I forget exactly what he said, but he was kind of like, yeah, we expected Tyrese to take over. And the fact that he's still 23 or somewhere in his like young 20s and he's still a leader on this team, like it really is rare, especially when they've got a guy in Joel who's a 30-year-old MVP candidate. The fact that Tyrese has these moments where he can step up is a testament not just to his talent, but to his leadership and his maturity that has been huge, huge, huge for the Sixers and will continue to be throughout his career.
Yeah, absolutely.
Like, what was that?
Yeah, no. Well, all I was gonna say is, the conversation's already started. Where do we go from here? Is this Embiid's team? Is this Maxey's team?
Why not both?
I can't tell you how sick and tired I am of that noise. I'll be honest with you. Derek Bodner had a good piece where he kind of addressed this earlier today, where he basically had his that famous scene in The Office where Gabe is talking to Andy, he's just telling him, "Shut up about the sun. Shut up about the sun." Was basically Derek Bodner talking about like, shut up about the discourse, trying to separate these two guys. The difference with it this time is that these guys are all in together. They are not. This isn't a Harden and Embiid relationship where one of these guys is complaining about the other guy getting more touches than him. This isn't him and Ben Simmons situation where it's like, you're making the team, in the image of one guy, not the other guy. This isn't that situation. These are two guys who love playing together, love competing together, complement each other incredibly well. If you had to design the best center to play with Tyrese Maxey, it's Joel Embiid. Granted, that's the best center for almost every single team in the league, but even still, it's Joel Embiid is the guy who can defend, a guy who can pass, a guy who can shoot, a guy who can work in the post. Yeah, that's the greatest design there. Now, you talk about a guy who would be the greatest compliment to Joel Embiid. How many years have we been saying Damian Lillard or Steph Curry is the type of player that you want to have with Tyrese Maxey? And I say it completely unironically now. And I think that on this, one of the biggest of all stages, that people nationally, not even just in Philadelphia, will finally start to understand this. While Tyrese Maxey is not quite on that peak Steph Curry, Damian Lillard level, that is not an unrealistic ascension. I mean, Steph might be a little bit because that's an all-timer, but that Damian Lillard level is completely attainable for Tyrese Maxey, and that was what was on display. So you talk about these two guys who are absolute fantastic teammates together. It was Tim Bontemps, I think, who was talking on the Hoop Collective podcast. I think it aired this morning, where he spoke to Joel, and he discussed that discord that comes out every year, like, what's going to happen? You're going to, talk about possibly a trade, this, blah, blah, Miami, whatever, all New York, all that stupid crap that comes out every single year. And the gist of the conversation ended just by saying the way that Tyrese Maxey has grown as a teammate of Embiid, as a complementary player, the way that their relationship has grown, there is no concern of Embiid wanting to trade out, which I thought was ridiculous from the first place. But it stamped any of those embers out because this is the perfect complement of just about anybody in the league for Joel. This is the city where he has spent his entire career. I know he said New York is his favorite city. I think he was trying to, troll the fans a little bit. I know it's Joel, not really the guy known to troll, but I think that's what he was looking to do in that case. But he loves it here in Philadelphia. That's evident. His family's here. He loves playing in front of these fans. He loves playing with Tyrese Maxey. There is no reason to make up this bullshit about, whose team is it? Who's the Batman? Who's the Robin? Whose team is this? Whose team is that? This is their team. That's it. This is their team. They are leading this team. There is hardly a single player who leads their team through the finals anymore. I get that it happened with Kawhi, but when you look at the Warriors, look at what a complete unit they were, and especially their success when they had Kevin Durant. Look at Nikola Jokic now with Jamal Murray. These guys, and Nikola Jokic, the best player in the NBA, mind you, had 2 games in this past series with the Lakers where he deferred to Murray, and Murray won those games. This is not like the era of duos is back, and you don't have to argue about whose team is what, this is their team. The Sixers are Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey's team, and that's perfectly fine. And, you talked about Nick Nurse kind of setting Tyrese Maxey free in last night's game. You know who really did it? Joel Embiid. Joel Embiid, who went to Tyrese Maxey and said to him, I need you. I need you in this moment. I'm paraphrasing, but Maxey did speak on the exact words that Embiid told him. But let him know that he needed Maxey to take over in that moment, and that's exactly what Maxey did. That type of self-awareness by Joel Embiid, that type of willingness and aggression from Tyrese Maxey is what makes this relationship works, and that's how they need to approach every game in crunch time for the foreseeable future, however many years that may be. And that's my rant.
And I agree with everything you said, but just like really 2 key points for me that I really want to call out is, Joel has had this history, and we've all seen it. It doesn't take away from his greatness as a player, but we've seen him just kind of like shrink his shoulders in moments when things aren't going his way. And that could be because he's had his injury history, right? And all the things that's happened with the different makeup of the teams and stuff like that. And he's always been looking for somebody to pick him up in those moments when he slumps. And with Harden, again, him and Harden were good together. Like, there's no doubt about that. But I feel like also Harden used to pout sometimes. So you have your 2 main guys pouting because things aren't going their way, or they're not getting foul calls, or they're not shooting well. That can be infectious. And I think just having Tyrese be that other guy this year and having that mindset and that energy, the positivity, and like, I'm gonna go down guns a-blazing. Like, I'm not gonna go down with my head, my tail tucked between my legs. I'm going to go down guns a-blazing. And I think that's a really big difference where Joel's like, all right, I can lean on you. I didn't have my best game, and we won this game, and we can move forward. And I need you, I need you going forward in the playoffs and in the future. And I think that's why if they get through this series, if they somehow come back and win this series, these players are having defining moments. And I go back to the Heat game. Again, another game that Joel wasn't having a good game, and Tyrese either. And they were getting hit with the Heat voodoo magic. And all of a sudden, Batum, who just doesn't care about that and never experienced that, and never experienced the Jimmy Butler playoff experience and stuff like that, he's like, you know what? I'm going to do it tonight, right? Like, what do I have to lose? And Joel needs to continue to lean on his guys, and they need to continue to pick him up when you have these moments. Because it could be game 6, and he could be having a bad game, and Tyrese needs to step up, and Tobias needs to step up, and, Kelly needs to step up. So I think, this is a good sign. Hopefully they can pull it out in game 6, and we'll talk about that later. But, I just think it's a good sign when you have somebody that's able to, like, lift his his head up in those moments.
It's kind of funny to think about Tyrese Maxey lifting up Joel Embiid's head, just from like a physical perspective. But I mean, that is what he's done. Like that is what he's been able to do. And you talk about Embiid kind of pouting, and Harden kind of pouted. And Ben Simmons was known to pout, and this has been a pouting organization for how many years? And when Jimmy was here, things were different. Things really felt different. And then Jimmy wasn't here anymore. And then the pouting really settled in after that. And it only got progressively worse and worse. You had more and more people pouting. And it was a terrible environment. And it's one of the many reasons that this team has lost in such dramatic fashion so many times over the past few years. But it seems, while the losing may not be done, there's still 2 elimination games for the Sixers in this series. So the losing may not be done, but things feel different. Things feel bright for the future. Whenever the offseason comes, this is the moment that Daryl Morey needs to put up or shut up. This is the moment where he will have just about every opportunity available to him, near unlimited cap space. He will have at least a fair ensemble of picks, up to 5 tradable ones, including the pick in the 2024 draft once that player is selected. Considering all that, there will be no excuse for Daryl Morey this offseason. But before we even get there, there is still a Game 6 that must be played. Before we even get into that, though, we do have to also talk about Tobias Harris. I know people don't want to talk about Tobias Harris, but we got to talk about Tobias Harris. And it's going to lead perfectly into that Game 6, because the Tobias Harris that showed up for Game 5 is the Tobias Harris the Sixers are going to need going forward. That is the guy that he was brought here to be. That is the guy that they need in order to win anything meaningful. He's been okay defensively throughout the entire series. He's been fine offensively in the first half of most of the series, and then drops off a cliff in that second half. He played a full and complete game in Game 5. Sam, what did you notice that was different about Tobias in Game 5?
It felt like, not to say that Tobias is one that doesn't try, but he was just putting in much better effort all the way around. It's easy to say that he was impactful when he shot 7-11 from the field, had 19 points. And obviously that's really good stuff. But the thing that really stood out to me is that he was, kind of playing the game that you have to against this Knicks team. He was going for rebounds. He was defending hard. For whatever limitations he might have athletically, and that he's not the quickest, he doesn't have the best hit mobility. He was doing his best to make Jalen Brunson work. And the Knicks, time after time, were going after him. Whether Batum or Oubre started on Brunson, the goal was to get Tobias in isolation. And Brunson hit some shots against Tobias, but it's not like he was getting blown by each and every time. Tobias was working hard to stay in front of him, and he forced Brunson to hit the pull-ups, which, granted, he was hitting because he's a good player, but he was doing what I thought was probably the best he could. Because he was at least able to stay in front of Brunson, the Sixers they didn't have to send another guy over. And I felt like once that happens, we saw how the Knicks, when they're doing it to Joel, he'll just get the ball out time and time again. And the Sixers, if they had shot well, probably could have run away with this game in regulation. There were so many times, especially in the first half, where it was just ball gets to Joel, he gets a double team, he passes it out, and guys weren't hitting their shots. But the fact that Tobias could at least hang on an island of sorts with Brunson, I thought was huge. The confidence in the scoring, he shot 6 threes, made 3 of them. That's obviously huge. And like Zach said, this is the Tobias that people had been, hoping to see, a guy who can kind of overcome, the bouts of inconsistency he's had over the regular season, over the course of his entire career with the Sixers, and put forth a game like that where, he also played 49 minutes. He was just extremely important for the Sixers, and Nurse has shown that he's comfortable pulling him down the stretch of games if he isn't rolling. but he was rolling and he deservedly got a chance to close out the game. We'll see if he can continue that through 2 more games this series, and then if those are Sixers wins, whatever happens. But Tobias was definitely playing like a guy who was not ready to call his career with the Sixers over, or at least finish his contract with the Sixers just yet. He really had a very impactful game, and he deserves credit for it.
Yeah, he of course definitely deserves credit. And you mentioned the offense of the Sixers in Game 5, and Nick Nurse talked about that at practice earlier today. They were getting good open looks. Guys just weren't hitting shots, and Tobias was kind of the exception to that rule. And you like that he took 6 threes. I think in Game 4 he only took 1, if I remember correctly. But getting that number up to 6, sinking half of them, obviously super key. But Batum, Kelly Oubre, Kyle Lowry, Campaign, they would dish the ball to Embiid. There'd be the double. He'd kick it out. They'd rotate the ball typically twice, and they would just repeat that ad nauseum. It just again and again and again. But they got open looks doing it is the crazy thing. So it feels like it hasn't been the Sixers' night in terms of role player success in any of the first 5 games. But if they can keep manufacturing those open looks, eventually they're gonna get knocked down. So I don't mind just thinking ahead in Game 6. I don't mind the offense that they had in place and instilled, as frustratingly repetitive as it was at times. But I feel like you're going to get those open looks continually. As long as you're getting them and you're getting a good shot, I have a good feeling about where that is going to go. You're going to need to have a pivot once that, inevitably does not work. But you will need to continue to trust that offense. I think you have to, without trying to, give a pun here, kind of have to trust the process as far as the offense is, is concerned. And Tobias was a huge part in making that offense work. That was kind of the biggest area of concern for me in regards to him throughout the series. Was he was defending fine, he was rebounding okay, as well as any Sixer who they'd all kind of poorly rebound. And Joel Embiid also rebounded really well in this game as well. 16 rebounds, obviously diving on the floor the last one there. So the rebounding battle a bit better all around for Philadelphia, but certainly Tobias was a factor in that. Moving on to Game 6. Sam, I'll start with you. What do you really think is the key for Philadelphia in this weird 9 p.m. East Coast playoff game?
I think the key is at least doing what they've been doing for most of the series and getting out to good starts. It's obviously shown that the minutes without Joel are not good, to put it lightly. And I think that part of the reason they've been able to, hang in this series at least is the fact that they're getting out to double-digit leads at the start of the first quarter, and then obviously they give it back. But imagine if they had less to give back, then it would be kind of different situations. They would be having to work out of bigger holes. So I think that's kind of the biggest thing. Just keep the offense, moving. If the Knicks, they've shown they have to throw 2 bodies at Joel because you have to. He's just that good of a scorer, even as limited as he is. Now, I do wonder if, one of the things about the remainder of this series that has me a little bit worried for the Sixers side is that there's 1 day breaks in between games instead of 2. So the fact that they had those 2, especially when Tyrese was ill, he had more time to get over it. Joel, with all the stuff he's been dealing with, has had more time. Now he doesn't have that. It's bang, bang, bang pretty much with just the minimum amount of rest. So I do wonder if, that has a big impact on, obviously if he's dealing with migraines with Bell's palsy, that's obviously tough, but I'm looking kind of at his mobility. And if the Knicks ever get to a point where they're comfortable leaving Embiid on an island because he doesn't want to drive, I think that might be where the Knicks could pull ahead and, close out the series. I think it would be kind of risky for them to do that. Like Joel has shown that he can draw fouls against whoever's in front of him, not just the players on the Knicks, but pretty much anybody in the league. Like he can do that because he's that good. So I think the Knicks are kind of in almost like a cat and mouse game of, are they comfortable letting Isaiah Hartenstein get some one-on-one opportunities against Joel, and they see, okay, if Joel, doesn't want to drive, he's going to rely on his jumper. If that's something they can live with, similar to what I was talking about with Tobias and Brunson, if you keep a guy in front of you and force him to hit a jumper, those are shots you kind of have to live with. Like that's one of the things about not just the playoffs, but Nurse has talked about this series. Some things you have to live with. But if Joel is able to kind of drive past guys, that's obviously different. And I'm wondering if the Knicks are ever going to get to that point where they just realize, okay, we can't keep sending two because they're going to get good shots. The Sixers very well could have gone off by they could have led by 15 at some point last game if guys were hitting their shots. And I'm sure Tom Thibodeau and his staff are looking at that and thinking, oh man, if those are a lot of open shots, we got to figure out a way to, and this Knicks team is really good at rotating around. They got guys who are super quick, comfortable playing big minutes and stuff. But at a certain point, it's just, when does it become too much? So I would say, again, Sixers got to keep getting out to a hot start. And I think, part of the reason we all believed in them in this series was because they've got Joel and Tyrese. And that two-man game has just been so good. If the Knicks keep sending extra bodies their way and opens up shots for guys and they eventually start hitting those shots, that's how the Sixers will get back into it. So I think it'll be a risk on the Knicks' part. At least that's one thing I'm looking at to see is, can they find a way to either, guard Joel in a way where they're not automatically doubling him, or if they can just continue to string those, scrambling rotations perfectly. I think that's kind of the key that I'll be looking for. On top of just, if this game, 9:00 is very, very late for everybody. I'm sure maybe Nick Nurse in one of the leagues, I forget what term he used for the leagues he's coached in throughout the years. Maybe he's at a 9:00 local start at some point, but I'm interested to see if starting that late has any impact on the players, just their ability to play and whatnot.
Yeah. Speaking to Nick at practice earlier today, he didn't, of course, Nick is not one to put too much stock in that kind of stuff, but he was asked about the 9:00 start, and he was like, "Yeah, well, I mean, we're gonna play. We're gonna do our regular strategy. We're gonna roll out and we're gonna give it a go." And that's just kind of, I think his even keeled mentality is kind of a help there. I do definitely agree the Sixers can't come out sleepy. I know it's a late night game, but you just can't come out sleepy in this game. You got to start fast, like you said. But when it comes to that kind of 1 day less of rest, the one thing that I will say is and that's absolutely true when you talk about these guys, Batum's playing a lot of minutes, Lowry's playing a lot of minutes, Harris, obviously Maxey and Embiid on the injury, dealing with the illness as well. Like Rocky said in Rocky 6, the fictional Rocky 6, not the real one, there's no oxygen up there for him either, talking about fighting the Martian. If there's no rest for the Sixers, there's no rest for the Knicks as well, right? That's the thing that I think stands out, is that you look at these Knicks at the end of Game 5, and they were exhausted. You look at Jalen Brunson. The word a lot of people have been using is defeated. I think that's a little much. I would feel I feel a great amount of hesitation saying when you're down 2-3 in a series that the guy who's been arguably the best player in the series looks defeated. But he looked tired, I'll say. So he's clearly exhausted. He played most of that entire game. Josh Hart looked tired in that game. Dante DiVincenzo looked tired in that game. Some of the most important players for the Knicks, and you can even argue that Mitchell Robinson, who's still coming back from this ankle injury, he's having to overcompensate. He's dealing with the pain. He looked tired too. These are really key guys for New York. And now you have Bogdan Bogdanović is set to miss the rest of the series, getting surgery. There's fewer and fewer bodies to space out these minutes for New York. And these guys are exhausted. So that little bit of extra rest would be nice for Philadelphia. But not being able to get that, New York has to suffer through that too. It's just the one thing that I do want to point out there. But Justin, what are you looking for in this Game 6? What do you think is the key to winning this matchup at home?
You brought a good point about, or both of you brought a good point about the rest. Knicks played 7 guys yesterday. Probably continue to play 7. So that will be tough ultimately. But my two keys are the start, how they start, right? They got to come out, and I'm not saying come out 10-2 or 15-3 or whatever. Just come out competitively, making shots, playing good defense, not giving up easy stuff. Like, cool. You giving up some tough twos or threes, whatever, but come out competitive. The key to me, where it seems like the game always shifts, is after the first quarter, the second quarter, they seem to just be lackadaisical, whether Embiid's on the court or not. They've had leads and they give them up immediately, right? 8-point leads, 9-point leads, late in the first, early in the second, 10-point lead, 11-point lead, and then they just evaporate whether Embiid's on the floor or not. And it's just like they have to figure out what's happening right then and there and why the let up is so obvious. Where next thing you know, the Knicks go on a 9-2 run and the game is tied. Like, I know the other team is good and they're going to make shots, but the sloppy passes or the not good shots, like those things have to be better during those moments. And specifically when Embiid is out there, when not out there, I'm sure that Nick Nurse is going to go to small ball between at the 5 in Game 6. I don't think we'll see a lot of Paul Reed. We might see him early, but I don't know. If they're just trying to give Embiid a minute or two, I think they'll go small ball at this point because, Paul Reed hasn't really done the best this series, and it seems like it's just not a good matchup for him. So, at this point, you got to do what you got to do. But my importance is, like, if they get up, like, 10 early, like, the Knicks are going to fight back and respond, but the Sixers can do the same thing and try to build on that double-digit lead and try to build, like, a 20-point lead or a 17-point lead if that's the case. But I think that's the key to me. Like, if they can get the Knicks down early, the Knicks are going to respond. They play hard, they fight hard, they do the things on the margins, they dive for loose balls. Like, are they going to do the same things as well to try to keep that lead and try to hold it? And that's when I think the keys is coming out starting strong, and when the Knicks try to go on that run and fight back, if the Sixers get up, like, how do they respond? So that's what I'm looking for.
Yeah, I think that's perfectly fair. You have to punch back, when you get hit. And we've seen this game, basketball's a game of runs, the tired cliche, but it's true. And, we've seen that be the case throughout. So if you can figure out how to limit those runs by New York, obviously that's going to move you a good bit forward in your chances to win the game. As far as Nick Batum at the 5, I feel like I've been pounding the table for that this entire time. I just feel like spacing out offensively, putting Batum at the 5 seems like a very clear and obvious answer. The one thing that I will say, I don't think it's going to happen. Even when Nick Nurse did give Embiid a breather in the second half, he put in Paul Reed again in the fourth quarter. But what was really interesting was the rest of that 5-man lineup during those last 5 minutes of the fourth quarter, right? So the guy who was missing from the court was Kyle Lowry. The Sixers went with size in those closing minutes of the fourth quarter, and they were not giving up rebounds to New York. And I think that's you heard Nick Nurse talk before Game 5 about some potential adjustments, to the second half lineup or whatever. And I think that's the adjustment that he was talking about. Obviously, I think it's adding that extra size, adding Nico Batum, Tobias Harris, Kelly Oubre, Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid. That's just a much better rebounding squad. I know Lowry's a decent rebounder for somebody his size, especially historically, but just having those bigger, longer defenders in, more general space for rebounding, I think that's more so the focal point. And if you're doing that, you're probably not trying to tax Nick Batum by giving him any extra minutes. He played 33 yesterday. That's the only reason I can think that you don't go to Nico instead of playing Paul Reed at all. I think they'll still give him his regular first half minutes, probably not looking at, hardly any Paul Reed in the second half. But then that closing lineup, when you're there with Joel, with Kelly, with Tyrese, and with Tobias. That I don't want to call it a death lineup. I don't think it's really that, but it seems like it's really unlocked the team's finishing ability, right? Just the clutch ability of this team in the fourth quarter. So for me, I want to make sure that stays. I want to watch that lineup roll out in those final 5 minutes of the fourth. Other than that, Joel has to have a better game. That's it, plain and simple. I get the triple-double. His game was unironically comparable to Jokic's in game 5 against the Lakers. And he didn't shoot as well as Jokic, blah, blah, blah. I get that. He had more turnovers, whatever. The point is, you're talking about high rebounding, triple-double, near 10 turnovers. I don't care that his game was comparable to Jokic's in a winning game, whatever. He simply did not play well enough. He did not have the right attitude to start the game. I need Joel to be consistent through that game. I need him to be ready to go for the entire length of the game. And to his credit, he absolutely turned it up come overtime. And, they don't win without what Joel did. His block shots, his rebounding, keeping the Knicks off the offensive boards for the most part, his playmaking, obviously contributing 19 points is not nothing in such a low-scoring game. But Joel does have to be more consistent throughout the entirety of the game. I need him to start hot. I need him, or at least start well, and continue and maintain that throughout the game. I don't know that the Sixers win if they get another. I don't know that Joel's going to go another triple-double with 5 blocks, but I do feel pretty confident in saying that if he has another offensive game like that, the Sixers' odds of winning Game 6 are not that high. So before we head out for the night, just going to get some quick predictions. Sam, do you have a score prediction for us? I didn't ask you to prepare anything, so you're coming up with it on the spot, but too bad, tough toenails. What do you got for us?
I do think that we're in for another low-ish scoring game. Just that's what the theme of this series has been. But I do just wonder, like I kind of mentioned, we all looked at this series as winnable for the Sixers because of the 2 stars they have, and it was just about how much else other guys are going to be able to step up. Whereas, as we've seen for the Knicks, even in the games where Brunson was bad, which, by the way, again, he was really cooking yesterday, we should mention, even the games where he was bad, he had other guys stepping up around him to kind of carry the Knicks forward. And I think a squad like that is sort of more prepared to just hang in a hard-fought series like this and come out victorious. So as tough as a fight the Sixers have shown, and the fact that they didn't roll over and die, and even Joel, like we talked about, the mopiness he has shown and his co-stars have shown over the years, the fact that he was able to be impactful in that game yesterday, despite looking, not like himself on offense. He kind of clutched up with his defense, especially late in the game. That is huge. But again, the low rest, the shrinking days of rest, and just the depth of this Knicks team and guys who have been able to step up, I do feel like the Knicks will eventually be able to close out the series, just given the advantage that they have, given the depth that they have, and that they don't have to worry about having, less than 4 guys who are ready to kind of step in and do something. So I can really see Game 6 going either way. Then obviously the Sixers would have the momentum in Game 7. But if I did have to lean one way, I think I might lean towards the Knicks closing it out. But I am ready to be wrong if that is not the case.
Justin, how about a prediction from you, man?
I'm feeling, to be quite honest, I feel like the Sixers will win. I do think that it'll be a close final 5 minutes. And then as we get closer to the 2-minute mark, Sixers will make enough plays to where it'll look like more like a 8 to 10 point win than, maybe a 3 or 4 point win. So I think, free throws and stuff like that. So I do think that'll probably be it to set up for a, Game 7 that will be bring heartache whether they win or lose because it's going to be so stressful.
Yeah, I mean, on the surface, it kind of feels like, well, you could say it two ways. You can say that it kind of feels like the Sixers would win before they go and lose Game 7 in New York. But at the same time, you can say, well, they went and won this game in Game 5 in such spectacular fashion that the letdown game is actually Game 6 here in Philly. So as far as, the mood, the vibes, I wouldn't say it's overly positive, which is shocking considering the win that they're just coming off of. But I could see it, as everyone else said, going either way in that case. I mentioned this to Kai Carlin of Sixers Wire earlier today. Every game, well, I guess I should say, I've missed all the big games this year. I missed, and Justin, I think you and I were talking about, I was talking about it with somebody, but I missed Joel Embiid's 70-point game here in Philly. I missed his 51-point game, Tyrese Maxey's 50-point game. I decided last minute not to go to New York for Game 5. I've missed every spectacular game. I am going tomorrow. I fully believe this means the Sixers will lose Game 6. And I apologize for that in advance. I will try and be better. But I do believe that means that the Sixers will lose this game. I see the final score being 106-103 Knicks. And I hope I'm wrong. I hope I'm wrong, and I hope this is a new era of me being there for spectacular games. We're going to see. I don't feel great about it, but we're going to see. Okay? We got a couple things working vibe-wise in the Sixers' favor. Josh Harris, the ownership group, Michael Rubin, who's still working with the Sixers from the shadows, together bought 2,000 seats that they're going to give to Sixers fans and those working first responders, medical community, and a litany of other different Philadelphia-based organizations. And it's fantastic. You gotta give props where they're due. There's been a lot said about this ownership group, and a lot of it very fair. But this was, granted, probably an insanely easy PR decision to make. At the same time, it was the right move, and I think that they should, at least be acknowledged for that. More importantly than the free tickets, Brickin' for Chicken is back for the entirety of the game. And then, Sam, you were saying that it's not just this game, but any game for the rest of the postseason if they advance. Is that right? Every home game, that is?
I want to make sure. We'll run through the entirety of each home game throughout the rest of the playoffs. So obviously, it could be just one more game if they either lose Game 6 or force Game 7 and lose that. But obviously, a great move there. The buying those tickets, I think, was a partial admittance that we know Knicks fans are going to show out for this game. We saw what Knicks fans are capable of. It's going to happen again. But I think it is still much better that they didn't sit idle, that they did something at least to make sure there were, Sixers fans there, and that there was a contingent of fans that, didn't have to worry about buying what is, while not a Madison Square Garden ticket, it's still pretty expensive, playoff ticket. So that's nice, and they're giving back to the community, which is nice. I really like the stretching of Brickin' for Chicken. We saw it had its moment in the play-in with Caleb Martin missing those free throws. Josh Hart having some bad free throw voodoo after missing one of his two at the end of regulation that allowed Maxey to force overtime. We will see if any Knicks players, if that happens. I think, again, like Zach said, like there's been a lot of talk about, these guys aren't like Lurie or Middleton. They're clearly the inferior owners and they don't care. And, they stepped up and they made a decision to show their commitment. And again, I think it's much better than doing nothing. They could have rested on their pride and been like, it's fine, but things will even out in Game 6. But they went on the offensive and they made a nice move. So we will see the impact that it has. I suspect there will still be plenty of New York fans, but they read the room. They saw something needed to be done, and they did something. So shout out for that, of course.
Yep. I mean, you got to acknowledge when they did something good. What you got, Justin?
And to offset your bad juju, more than likely going to be in the arena not working, but as a Rabbit fan. So
I told you got to
probably
bring the ruckus.
80% sure that I'm going to be there, and I'm literally like, if I go, I'm bringing my whole family besides my 2-year-old son. So my brother, his girlfriend, my dad, like we going to come like ready. So I'm more than likely going to come to the game, and more so like, of course you're afraid of, not afraid, but you're like, damn, what if they lose? If and I'm at the game and got to get out of traffic and all that. I'm more so like, so 4 Knicks fans won't be there. Like I'll be there with my family. So that's what type of time I'm on. So I think I'm gonna try to gather the troops and see if I could be at the game to help support. So
For sure. Yep, got the Crosbys at the game. Like everybody for this late night playoff game, bricked up for some chicken. It's going to be a great night if the Sixers win. If not, we got a lot of offseason content that we can talk about. So we shall see what will happen tomorrow night, 9 o'clock, or by the time that this airs, probably today, Thursday, May 2nd, to be clear, 9 o'clock. I guess let's go Sixers. I don't know. Depends if we want to be working in New York this weekend, but it'd be nice to see. A Game 7 forced. That's for sure. But thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for watching, joining us today. Of course, I've been Zach Chavalella, Sam D. Giovanni, Justin Crosby. Thank you so much for joining us today. And listen, folks, it's not easy being a Sixers fan. We understand that since the process began. Okay, dramatic every single turn. Just know that you are not alone and that we, just like you, are still processing.